NFL teams today are scoring more points than ever. Let us take some time and look back at the games in which teams have scored the most. Buckle up, because we're about to see more high scoring than a marijuana-themed orgy. Unfortunately, I do not have video for this game, so this 1963 game with the same teams will have to do. In 1948, the Cardinals were good. Really good. They went 11-1 and they had the number one offense, scoring 33 points a game, which was a record at that point. They would go to the championship game where they would lose to the Eagles. In week 3 of the 1948 season, the Giants defense allowed 41 points. In week 4, they allowed 45 points. In week 9, 52 points. And in week 5, they gave up 63 points in the 10th highest scoring game of all time. All 98 points of this game were scored on touchdowns, and not a single extra point was missed, which was uncommon for that era. Not much else is known about this game. The Cardinals put up 42 points in the first half, a record at the time. The 48 Cardinals would go on to have perhaps the greatest 4-game offensive stretch in NFL history, scoring 48.8 points per game from week 5 to week 8. In 1985, the Chargers had the best offense in the league, under the lead of Pro Bowl QB Dan Fouts and Pro Bowl wide receiver Wes Chandler. This game saw consistent scoring. At least 21 points were scored in every quarter. In the fourth quarter, Steelers kicker Gary Anderson kicked a 26-yarder to give the Steelers a 44-41 lead. After driving, Chargers running back Gary Anderson ran in a 2-yard touchdown to take the lead. Pittsburgh's subsequent efforts at a game-winning drive were thwarted when Jeffrey Dale picked off David Woodley's pass and returned it for a touchdown. The Steelers were then picked off again near the very end of the game. The final score would have been even higher if Don Coryell was successful at running up the score in the end. Also, if the Chargers hadn't missed 2 extra points. What do you get when 2 above-average offenses go against 2 below-average defenses? Well, sometimes you get this. This game was powered by a lot of turnovers inside team's own territory. Seattle kicker Norm Johnson kicked 3 field goals that day, all of which were from 42 yards. When he tried to attempt something from further away, it went wide left. Entering the fourth quarter, the Chiefs were up 42-31. A 1-yard rush from Kurt Warner, not to be confused with Kurt Warner, cut the deficit to 42-38. After a Chiefs 3-and-out, the Seahawks had 5 minutes to once again drive down the field. Dave Krieg found Paul Johns in the end zone for a 14-yard pass. The score is now 45-42. 2:21 remains on the clock as the Seahawks kick it back to the Chiefs. The Chiefs drove down the field quite quickly. With less than a minute left, Theodis Brown caught this 21-yard touchdown, which was at first ruled an interception. A Seahawks player came away with the ball, but the refs still ruled it a touchdown. The Chiefs were now up 48-45. An extra point here would force the Seahawks to go for a touchdown with only 1 minute left.
Right back down there, absolutely. Seattle needs a touchdown now. They don't need a touchdown now. The kick was wide. Seattle can tie it.
Nick Lowry, the Kansas City kicker, only missed 6 extra points in his 18-year career, and this one will be the most costly of them all. This miss gave the Seahawks a chance. They drove down the field with less than 1 minute left. They managed to gain enough yardage to give their kicker a chance to tie it. In overtime, the Seahawks got a great return on the kickoff, giving them the ball around midfield. They only needed around 2 or 3 first downs to give their kicker a good position to win it, and a good position they gave.
There it is. Game over. It's off to the Kansas City Chiefs for a valiant effort today.
Same score, different teams. The 2013 Broncos scored more points than any team in NFL history, 606 of them to be exact. They scored the second highest points per game of any team of all time. This game had more field goals than any other game on this list, with 5. There were field goals at both buzzers, before half and before the end of regulation to win the game. Ironically, Dallas' strategy in this game was to keep possession of the football for as long as possible to keep it away from Manning. Their opening drive lasted a whole 7 minutes.
That's how you beat Peyton Manning.
That's how you beat him. We did it in San Diego, keep him off the field.
It didn't even really work in the end. The Broncos had a higher time of possession anyway. The two teams combined for 1,039 yards in the game. That's over half a mile. Tony Romo even had a 500-yard game, one of only 24 in existence. In the end, however, it would be the Broncos that would come out on top after a Tony Romo interception gave them excellent field position with only 2 minutes left. This was an expected shootout, as both teams had great offenses and horrible defenses. In fact, this was a matchup against the third worst and worst defenses of that year, scoring-wise. Interestingly, there was not a single rushing touchdown in this game. Drew Brees threw for a record-tying 7 touchdown passes in this game, 8 if you count this pick 6. Drew Brees is one of only 8 quarterbacks to have thrown for 7 touchdowns in a game. Drew Brees also threw for over 500 yards in this game, a feat only 20 quarterbacks can boast. Drew Brees put up a whole 58 points in fantasy this day, which I believe might be a record, but I'm unsure. Together, Eli Manning and Drew Brees passed for a combined 13 touchdowns, which I know for sure is a record. The only field goal of the game came as time expired, giving the Saints a well-fought victory in a game no one should have lost. Same score, different teams. This was a Week 16 matchup between the 10-4 Raiders and the 6-8 Oilers. Despite what Pro Football Reference may say, this was not a playoff game. Unfortunately, I do not have video of this game, so I'll instead use video clips from games from around the time so you'll get the point. This was a shootout for the ages from what I could tell. It all started when the Raiders returned a punt 69 yards for a touchdown. That's right, this game had punts. The Oilers responded by scoring 2 touchdowns. The score is 14-7 in the second quarter. Oilers score again to make the score 21-7. Raiders score 2 touchdowns, tie the game 21-21. Oilers score again, 28-21. Raiders score 28-28. Oilers score 35-28. Raiders respond 35-35. The 70 points scored in the first half is the most ever. Third quarter, Raiders take the lead for the first time since the first quarter. Oilers respond twice, 49-42. Fourth quarter, Raiders score TD. It's now 49-49. To finish off the game, Raiders scored the one and only field goal to take the lead at 52-49. The Oilers quarterback, George Blanda, was also their kicker, and he would be responsible for a total of 37 points, 5 touchdowns and 7 extra points. George Blanda would later play for the Raiders. You know what they say, if you can't beat them, join them. In 48, the 49ers had an historically great offense, boasting 35.4 points per game, which was a record at the time. In each of their first 7 games, they scored at least 31 points. Unfortunately, I do not have video of this game, so instead I'll be showing video of a game the same year against the Browns. The 48 49ers went 12-2 but failed to make the postseason as the Browns went a perfect 14-0 and won the division. 2 teams that didn't make the postseason that year were the Colts and the Bills, who were both 7-7, which is some bullshit. The 49ers had the number 1 offense and number 2 defense for the league. This game is surprising in that the 49ers gave up an incredible amount of points to a 2-win Dodgers team who had the second worst scoring offense in the league that year. 40 points is the most that 49ers D gave up that whole season, and it is also the most points the Dodgers scored that season. I don't know much about the game itself. Apparently the Dodgers scored on a halfback pass in the first period, and they also had an offensive fumble recovery for a touchdown in quarter number 4, and then afterwards a guy named Hardy Brown missed an extra point. So that's something, I guess. What happens when the number 1 offense plays the number 2 offense? Well, this. The 2018 Chiefs were the 5th highest scoring team in NFL history. They scored so well, even John Williams would be jealous. This was one of the most hyped up games possibly in regular season history. Both teams were 9-1 heading in. On one side you have Jared Goff having his best year yet, and Todd Gurley also having a hell of a year. On the other side you have studs like Patrick Mahomes, Kareem Hunt, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Chris Conley.
Holy shit, I'm gonna come.
The Vegas over-under for this game was the highest it has ever been, 63.5, meaning they predicted 63.5 combined points from both teams. Foolish. A shootout we expected, and a shootout it was. There were 7 lead changes, including 4 in the last 11 minutes. It's like each team just refused to lose. In a perfect world, nobody would have to lose this game. Meanwhile, in our world, the Chiefs would have to take the L for this game. This is the only game in NFL history in which both teams score more than 50 points. A team scoring 50 points in itself is rare, as it only happens around once every 65 games. By far the most surprising entry on this list has to be this game, coming from perhaps the two most unexpected teams. I'm talking about the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. The Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. In 2004, these teams went 8-8 and 4-12 respectively. Neither team had anywhere near a top offense for the season. In Week 12, these teams would face off in the Battle for Ohio. Kind of a crummy battle if you ask me. Anyway, throughout the game, the Browns had to play catch-up with the Bengals. They finally managed to take the lead with only 10 minutes left, only for the Bengals to take it back with 4 minutes left. The Browns' final bid for a comeback fell short when Deltha O'Neal picked off Kelly Holcomb and returned it 31 yards for a touchdown, sealing a Bengals victory. The Vegas over-under for this game predicted a combined score of 37.5. Boy, were they wrong. Heck, they nearly covered that in the third quarter alone. The final score was 58-48. To put that in perspective, on January 1st, 1948, the St. Louis Bombers beat the Boston Celtics 58-48. And that was basketball! Alright, before we take a look at number 1, let's quickly go over a few games that just barely didn't make the list. Lions vs. Eagles 1995 wildcard. Eagles beat Lions by the insanely peculiar score of 58-37, likely to never happen again. The game started off 7-7, but by the third quarter, the Eagles had scored 44 unanswered points against the favored Lions. 1983 Packers vs. Washington football team. I have a football team. Oh boy, what's its name? Football team. NFL Throwback posted this as the highest scoring Monday night game, only to have that be outdated in 4 hours. Incredible. It would have made this list had the Washington kicker not missed a 39-yard attempt at the buzzer. What a shame. 2019 Buccaneers vs. Rams. This is a bit of an odd game to talk about. Both teams only scored 7 combined points in the first quarter, only for the floodgates to open in the second quarter, where they scored a combined 38 points. Then it went calm again. 6 points were scored in the third quarter off the feet of Greg Zuerlein and Matt. The fourth quarter then saw 44 combined points, my goodness! 1950 Rams vs. Colts. The 1950 Rams were the highest scoring team in NFL history, scoring 38.8 points a game. The Rams scored an incredible 70 points without any defensive scores to help them out. Amazing. And you know what? They came back the very next week and beat the Lions 65-24. What was this team? The original Greatest Show on Turf? Well, they didn't have turf back then. It'd be the Greatest Show on Grass. No wonder their scores were so high. Cardinals vs. Packers 2009 wildcard. Cardinals win in an overtime classic on a fumble return where there is clearly a face mask that was uncalled. 2007 Browns vs. Bengals. The second battle for Ohio. This time the Browns win. 1986 Jets vs. Dolphins. A shootout between the legend Dan Marino and the not-so-legend Ken O'Brien. The Jets win in an overtime pass by Mr. O'Brien to Wesley Walker, who had a career day, scoring 4 touchdowns and 194 yards on only 6 receptions. It is the time you have all been waiting for, the number 1 highest scoring game of all time, which I believe deserves a video all to itself.